I was talking to myself, mate.
No problem. Now we can talk to millions. Segue.
Literal millions.
Literal millions. Don't know where they are, but they're coming. Hello, everyone, and welcome to F1 Failcast. My name is Mr. Bolkenberg, and alongside me, as always, is our taco friend, Mr. Oh, there's a taco.
It's my chair, I promise.
That's a post-taco grunt there from Mr. Esteban. How you doing, sir?
Buenos dias. It has been a crazy one, mate. Absolutely crazy. I've been up, down, left, right, all over. Got crazy projects on at work, sickness in the family. Next time we do this, I might be talking to you from good old Blighty, the way things are going.
Oh, wow.
But, yeah, I'm a professional, and we're here for F1 stuff, so I am here. I'm tense. I've been all over the city this morning, left, right, and centre. But this is going to be the highlight of my day. I've been looking forward to this all day. We've got so much good news. I've written it all down. Well, I haven't, but I've got kind of notes. It's in here. It's in the air.
Fair. We've already got people talking in the chat already. Hello, Mr. Mike. Hope you're well. Yeah. So we, as always, if you're new to Failcast, then this is our F1 shenanigans on track, whilst talking about the shenanigans in real life and off track, of which we've got plenty to talk about. And we were saying before we just went on air that we're both quite positive about the Canadian circuits. You might not actually see a complete faff up of driving for once.
Possibly.
we
normally this is a bogey circuit for me. Normally this is a bogey circuit for me. Like if you look back at the previous years, I've always been really bad at Canada, but it just seemed to click this year. It's funny how I think this game has been so much different compared to all the previous years, actually. Like, I've seen the biggest change in relative performance on different tracks, but I guess that's down to the size as well. Getting those fat bottoms through Monaco.
Exactly. And, wow, mine was practically a shelf. I felt like I could twerk through Raskas, and maybe that was probably not a good idea at the time. But yeah.
No, probably not. Shall we do qualifying?
Let's do quali and see how we get on, as per usual.
So, much news this week. Much news.
Tons of news. We was just quickly reviewing it before we went live, and he's like, oh, all the way through.
Oh.
So, where would you like to start, our dear Taco Man?
I tell you what, should we tack on to the end of the last episode where we're talking about the engine regulations, because at the time we weren't entirely sure why people were complaining about it from the engine companies. I since did my research, which is advisable for a news and opinion podcast, and it turns out that particularly Ferrari and Mercedes, but especially Ferrari, are not happy about the regulations because they feel it involves too much standardization. And they feel that the team owners are well on their way to morphing the sport into something like IndyCar. Basically, the standardization was going to be far too great for them. They felt that as a technical exercise, the sport was going to be less attractive. And Liberty then felt the need to release a statement saying, well, we don't want IndyCar either. We want, what was it they said? We want cars that are... what was it they said? Well, not different but equal, but different but similar, or something like that. What they were implying was, well, what he said exactly is any car should be able to win. Which I heard that, and like a little alarm went off in the back of my mind that just, this guy does not understand how the sport works. It's like normally people enter the sport as a team owner and don't understand how the sport works.
People don't
Tony
buy
Fernandez,
the sport.
Gene Haas. It's very rare someone buys the entire sport and then proceeds to show the world how they don't understand how it works.
Yeah.
And it's very rare I say this, but I'm with Ferrari on this one. Problem is Lewis Hamilton's on the side of the new owners. He's talking about, well, we need sprint races. F1's missing sprinting.
Oh God, no.
And I don't want. The thing is, he's the world champion of Formula One. I'm just some git on the internet. But the point is that he's been a lifelong F1 fan as well. Surely he knows that F1 has never been about sprinting. It's a complicated technical championship. It's always been a marathon and not a sprint. You know, that's why pit strategy has always been such a big part of the sport.
Why would that then? Because it's interesting. Because if someone is openly saying about how dull and boring their sport is, that they've spent their entire life getting towards and then winning and then trying to dominate and then rub their wang all over it, what does that say about him? I guess as much as the sport itself.
It's funny you say that because the same thing occurred to me. Wow, there is no grip out on track right now.
No,
absolutely
it's a dry race, by the way, so don't stick your wings up too much.
I have not. I've got into the habit now of running wet conditions with a dry setup.
Yeah.
It's a little bit buttock clenching at times, but it just seems to pay off. No, I mean, it's interesting that you say that actually, because I thought something quite similar. Because it ties into this sort of character trait we've seen of him all along, actually, where he says one thing but actually feels a different way.
Yeah.
So, you know, I love the competition, I love the close racing, but then he actually has to do some racing, and all he does is complain to his race engineer.
Yeah.
At least Max Verstappen is honest about it. Did you see what he said a few weeks back?
No.
He was saying, "I don't just want to win; I want to dominate." Like credit. I mean, it'd be boring to watch, but I have to at least credit Max for being completely honest there.
Yes.
Like he basically said, "I don't want any challenge. I just want to qualify on pole and go pole to flag constantly. That's what I want." And
Thank you.
on some level, it's what every driver should want. But
yeah,
I just felt it's one of the few times I've had cause to be happy with something Max has said. That, you know, I don't want to see it, but at least he's honest about how selfish he is. Where Lewis always tends to pay lip service to certain ideas, but never actually acts on it. And I think this is another case of that. What is interesting is how you're seeing Lewis and the new owners becoming quite obvious bedfellows, actually.
Well, they
seem to have a lot of common ground.
I agree, but who's the bankable driver in America?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. Actually,
I just think who's the most business opportunist savvy driver that's on the grid that would be the one to break the American market, that says we need sprint races, we probably need a point for fastest pit stop, a point for leading lap 20, lap 40, lap 60 of a Grand Prix. Hello NASCAR. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of we need mindless, because we're so scared that people might actually be, I don't know, looking on Twitter instead of actually looking at the adverts being CGI'd onto grass next to a race.
Bernie says never drink and drive.
Yeah. But do you know what I mean? To me, that's them two going, right, we can forge a business, and oh look, your album that comes out next year might actually chart at number 72.
Pirellis and Hot Wings, that's the title, I bet you.
Featuring Grosjean's cookbook.
I think you're right, but at the same time, I also believe that for all their faults, I think Liberty are aware of over-Americanizing the sport too quickly. From the way that they responded to particularly Ferrari's criticism, that they were, you know, Americanizing F1, turning it into IndyCar. They were pretty tetchy about having that said, actually. But I couldn't help. What's up? You crashed?
Yeah.
Oh, mate, what happened to you?
I just clipped the wall very briefly out at the end of Sector 1. We'll have a quick read.
No. Oh, goddamn! But this has become our new Failcast standard, hasn't it? The last 3 Grand Prix, one of us has been qualifying alone.
That's all right. We can.
Do you want to restart since it's only Q1?
No, I'm okay. To be fair, I am. My time will still stand, and I'll get through to Q2 because I'm third fastest.
but it won't. But it won't respawn your car in Q2, will it?
No, wait, but that's okay, because that means I'm still ahead of several drivers before anything. It'd be good, Ben. From the
Okay, are you sure? Because we can restart. I do not mind in the slightest.
No, it is all good.
Because people are in for a very boring Q2. Because I'm trying to put as little wear on my tyres as possible.
That's all right. It's I've got you on screen. It's nice to see you on screen actually for people that don't follow you on the Twitch. So it's all good.
I'm going to come into the pits like a good boy, change my tyres, and then I'll be back out again for a bit of on-track action. That gives me a chance to continue on topic.
Yeah.
So for me, it's very hard to read where this whole rule change is going. Ross Brawn seems to be the one that I side with the most. He's been very clear that he wants to find a different solution to energy penalties. What the fucking hell am I talking about?
Yeah.
Engine change penalties.
Yeah,
although
yeah.
they're refusing to remove the limit next year on 3 engines per season, and that's actually down to Ferrari. Red Bull had submitted a proposal to retain a 4-engine system next season, and Ferrari shot it down. And you need unanimity in order to get any rule change passed. And they said, we've already done the R&D work, very expensive R&D work, to make sure our engines can get through within those rules, so that we're not going to waste that money. And again, I found myself siding with Ferrari on that. But
Makes sense.
in terms of the engine spec, they've been very clear that it's about enticing new teams into the sport, and that is going to require cost control and some level of standardization. How far you allow that to go before the sport is damaged by it is very hard to say. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in a moment. But what Liberty then went on to say is that they've been having conversations with brands that they describe as ones that should be in Formula One. So I'm guessing we're talking Porsche, we're talking VW Group, executives, maybe we're talking, I don't know, someone like Maserati or Ford, Jaguar, whatever. But they said they've been talking to a lot of companies, and what Chase Carey said is that universally what he's told is that it's far too expensive, and if they attempt to control costs in any way, they're round at the back. So what's the incentive for being there? Which is, to be fair, it's kind of hard to argue with that logic, because it is true. If you're not willing to spend the money, then you aren't going to be competitive. But at the same point, it's that classic dichotomy of Formula One, that high technology and high rollers and the heavy spending has always been part of it.
Yeah.
So at what point do we say it's got out of control? What kind of cost measures can actually be enforced realistically? Because Red Bull have been preparing for years for some sort of rule change like this, because they've split their business into several different companies. So they can say, well, Red Bull Formula One hasn't spent all this money on special gearbox components. It's Red Bull Technologies, which isn't an entrant in the World Championship. So what do you think? I mean, is it enforceable? Is it going to damage the sport, do you think? If we have teams entering that don't just follow the Haas model but build upon it?
I don't know. I completely see what the other manufacturers were talking about. So if you're looking at how, like Haas, we've already heard the first thing.
Ooh. There we go. It's
Squeaky bum bum. That is not the wall that I crashed at. You're coming round to the wall that I crashed at. There's a little bit of barrier that juts out on the red bit. That's
I see it.
I was just awkward enough that I'd clipped the barrier there, and it was the wheel that had hit it. So I think we're already hearing that Haas, who is running at a certain cost budget that they've determined is what they feel is acceptable financially to run their team at, and they're not getting any sponsors that are coming in. As you can see, that the wonderful half-assed car is plopping around, going with only one sponsor really on. They already know that they're never going to get to the front on that kind of money, and he's already saying, if we're still where we are in 2-3 years' time, I'll be off. And so he is already a living example of what they're all saying. So for me, a cost cap should come in for sustainability. Really, I still think the grid looks quite lonely at 20 cars. But
yes, it does.
I guess I've been brought up with pre-qualifying and DNQs and things like that. I'd much more rather see a 26, 28 car grid, but everyone be maybe a second a lap slower, and everyone saved like 100 million, and all of those people have jobs, and it's a business that is self-aware and runs around on itself. And if it means that engine rules and things like that have some kind of rules and regs of standardisation, that was a wonderful pull out of the pits from Mercedes there. I just spotted.
But I mean, yeah. Don't you feel that perhaps they're chasing an unattainable ideal a little bit?
Yes, I do. I think things will always go in and out of business. I think that's why also you need to have privateers instead of all manufacturers. To stop chasing the manufacturers, because it'll be them that will leave, and it'll be stuck with Williams and Sauber left if they all decide. Especially when we're looking like, right, let's take Brexit. I don't want to bring Brexit into it too much, but if we take Brexit and then the effect that has on the UK, and then everything costs more, so therefore they're going to reduce their costs, and then say some manufacturers decide that it's no longer worth staying in the UK, or we stay in the UK and fund all of our jobs, but we're not going to run a Formula One project because global economies, then suddenly we lose 3-4 teams down to a manufacturing and overhead thing, because it's not cost effective to actually run as a business. Williams posted a loss this year, I believe, despite all of the money that Stroll brings. And Kubica is not able to get a drive at the moment because he's $1 million short of sponsorship, apparently, is the latest rumour.
Oh, I did not hear that. We'll get back to that in a minute, because I want to talk about Kubica, because he's having another test.
Yes.
But to build on what you said, I actually, again, we don't really want to bring politics into the podcast, I suppose, but it did occur to me actually that Brexit is probably going to be very damaging to the British Formula One industry, actually.
And so
hugely so. I mean, even things like travelling to the European races is suddenly going to become a much more bureaucratic and expensive process than it once was. And again, that's not in and of itself a huge impediment, but
thank you, Mike. Sorry, cut it in there.
Very, very wise words from your man there. I'm not against some level of standardisation, but we already have it. Brakes are a standardised part. There's a series of approved suppliers.
Except for Grosjean.
Except for Grosjean. Not Grosjean approved.
Yeah.
And, tyres are a standardised part, which they didn't used to be, and perhaps the most important standardised part. ECUs are going to be standardised in the proposals in the new engine regs, which is something that Ferrari and Mercedes are very unhappy about, because, bye-bye qualifying mode. Oh wow, I've lost half a second by trying to be fast.
Don't do that.
I've forgotten my own rule about driving in the wet, which is drive slow to be fast.
Yes.
Which is really bizarre, but it's true. But I mean, it's such an international sport. I mean, yes, most of the teams are British or operate within Britain, but the staff they hire are not universally British. The majority are, actually, which has always surprised me. I mean, if you look at like the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s, around then it made sense. But these days, I don't think Britain necessarily excels in engineering in any way, but it still seems that a lot of Brits make it into Formula One. I don't know if it's just down to a love of the sport or what, but that aside, that is something to bear in mind, isn't it? And
yeah,
I am curious how it's going to affect teams like Williams. But then again, what gives me some hope is that Sauber make it work, and they're outside the European Union as well.
Yes, they do. They do. But they're working because they're running on a very small budget, has ultimately been increased. And where have they gone over the last X amount of years? They're now at the back. I don't know how much of that is minutiae, and I don't know how much of that is other people. I'm just always trying to
I'm prepared to lay almost all of it on minutiae. And I know that sounds very harsh. I know that sounds super harsh, but look at how their form has changed just in the races since Fred Vasseur has taken over.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
And then, like, he turns up and suddenly the investors are willing to part with enough money to restore some of the factory back to operational grade and hire 100 new staff.
Yeah.
And they've allowed him to cancel the Honda deal, which was basically going to underwrite the team. So I don't know if his negotiating tactics are just better and Benicia was insane or what, but
all of the above.
I'm actually really excited to see what happens to Sauber in the next season.
Yeah,
I've got a good feeling about them going into next year. You know, I really do. But incidentally, speaking of budgets, do you know who runs on the lowest budget?
McLaren?
The smallest budget in Formula One this year and last year, Force India.
Ah, okay.
Force India have the lowest budget, and they're fourth in the Constructors' Championship.
Interesting.
I mean, and it's amazing that the fact they build their own car and still manage to have a budget smaller than Haas's.
Well, actually, I guess that then opens your eyes up a bit more to what can be done on a smaller budget, I guess.
That's exactly what I was getting at. That there is an argument for cost cutting and standardised parts, but when Force India run on the smallest budget of any team on the grid, which is 90 million a season, I actually thought some teams were running on like 40, 30 million a season, but it turns out that's not the case when you actually add in all the associated expenses.
Okay.
Williams run on, I believe 110 million was their budget. Sauber were in between on around 100 million. Up to Ferrari and Red Bull, who spend about 400 to 500 million a year.
See, I do think the upper echelons are slightly crazy. But I thought that, like, Mano were running on about 50, 60 million last year.
Yeah, yes, they were. But talking about teams that are still in the sport,
Yeah.
the smallest budget was Force India, and the reason I bring that up is, as you say, it shows that actually it's not only about the money; it's about making smart decisions.
Yeah.
And I think more so than Haas, Force India represent a team that's done technology sharing correctly, because they were under McLaren's wing. And then they came out from under that when they felt they were competitive enough. And then they were under Mercedes' wing, somewhat. And now, they're innovating in the aero field. They're fourth in the Constructors' Championship for the second year in a row. I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that you can compete on a smaller budget if you make the right decisions.
Yeah.
But it does come with the caveat that they'll probably never be a World Championship winning outfit unless they can get a work steal.
Yeah.
Oh, we've gone dry.
We have. Go
and
now.
Your game didn't
Go
crash.
now.
And your game did not crash.
No. The latest update has sorted it. It was
Superb.
literally for about one or two. It was for one single update. It used to crash every time it would go to spectator mode for a new session. So, no, we're okay now. I tested it out before this happened.
Oh, it's still raining.
But everyone's gone out on Ultra Softs, so go.
Me too. I'm just going to let signs get out of my way. So, moving onwards and upwards, shall we?
Yes.
You touched on Robert Kubica, and I really want to hear more about his budget woes, because I didn't know anything about that. What I did know is that Williams are putting him in the car for a third test. Wow, It's greasy out. It's very slippy.
Like chip fat grease.
Exactly.
I'm done.
Only you can prevent chip pan fires. Now, putting him in the car for a third test, all that tells me is that they really aren't sure about him at all, are they?
exactly. He's clearly... They've got some reservations. They're also... It's so difficult to know who else to put on board. Now, they're giving it the old, we're the most desirable seat out there at the moment. Well, it's either you or the Saab.
Which is true.
And they can take their time. But I do think that a team, if they're going to show competitive angle, you don't leave your seat till last, because other people get itchy and then will tie themselves down. The last time I can remember something like really, really top level being decided like after a season has been closed, apart from Bottas obviously being forced to Mercedes, I'm thinking of when Senna moved from McLaren over to Williams in like 93, 94, and they had no one to replace him at McLaren, and Brundle ended up getting that seat.
I remember that.
Drama alarms. And lots of people held out for that seat because there was naff left because it's too late, and so they got a decent driver, but not necessarily one that you'd get in your first picks. And I think that shows Williams has slipped back down the order again, in that actually they can't... The big people have already settled down, so therefore they're stuck with who they've got left.
I take it as a sign that we were indeed correct all along, and they're going to sign boring Scotsman Paul the rest at signs.
That's a bit of shit from Carlo. He's going to block you into that chicane as well if you don't get out of the way. I'm assuming he's on a hot lap.
I'm hoping I can get by him. Come on, car.
Nice, nicely done, sir.
Thank you. I was crapping my pants, if I'm honest with you. Have I just put it on pole?
Yep, by a second.
In traffic?
Yep.
Jesus Christ.
But the times are a good 6-7 seconds slower than what you'd normally get. There you go, I can just beat you by 10. But, so it must be right borderline between inters and dries. I think for me, you're right. It does show that Kubica, they've still got some kind of we're not sure. I don't know how they can say that it's a we're not sure. He either has the pace or he's not. And I wonder if it shows that actually Renault, when they were giving the old, oh yeah, he done really well, blah, 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 was maybe if he doesn't have the pace, were they just blowing smoke so that it made it a nice, happy story that he came back and done the test, and now actually we're finding the real gravy. Or...
Well, it was around the time they put that grandma in their car, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's true. Or is it that Williams are now so risk-averse? Or is it that they've convinced Martini that they will have a driver under 25 and Mr. Pascal Wehrlein will be there next year?
I could actually see Wehrlein swooping in at the last minute. I think Mercedes are scared to let him slip away, aren't they?
Yeah, because he's kind of stuck in no man's land now. Once again, pole by 6/10. Well done.
I think I need to come in now, though. I've taken too much out of these tyres.
Especially if you're going to use them in the race now.
I'm through. That's the main thing. Yeah, it does make me think that they're going to go. I still think they'll actually go with the Resta. I'm not going to rule Wehrlein out. I am going to rule Kvyat out.
Yes.
Just because I don't know what money he brings aside from Red Bull money, and they've just fired him. They've actually fully fired him as well. He's nothing to do with Red Bull anymore. Yeah. I'm up 3/10 still across the line.
Everyone's going faster every lap, but just think that these are the. If you don't go faster again later, these will be the tyres you'll start the race on.
Yeah. See, I'm now up almost half a second. I'm coming in. I'm chickening out. It doesn't matter. It's not for the grid. It's
yeah, everyone's going massively faster, so you can come in, put on some new ones, and go again.
I think I've only got super softs.
Does can Jeff give you some weather update? Not.
What I find is usually when it's changeable, it just says we don't have that information right now.
That's true. Hamilton's just gone fastest on super softs by a second.
I sent you. I was going to send you a screenshot the other day that was Jeff telling me in the middle of a rainstorm that he thinks it's time for slicks.
God, love that.
I asked him like 3 or 4 times, and he's like, "It's borderline, but I think the slicks are going to be the faster tyre." And I was thinking, I think you've got that wrong, Jeff.
Jeff having a meltdown in the middle of a Grand Prix.
Hold on. I actually have a set of Ultrasofts left over from Q1.
Go for it, because everyone's going a good second faster. You're not through. As it's stopped raining entirely now.
Then to the track.
Mass is going to go second. I think I'm going to go Pascal Wehrlein if Mercedes have anything to do with it. If Williams have anything to do with it, it'll be Paul de Rest. If Sky F1 have anything to do with it, it'll be called PDR, as they keep calling him.
Or Johnny Herbert.
Yeah. Pop Johnny in, that'll do. That'll confuse
Oh shit, what did it... Oh fuck. Just binned it.
Oh no! 14th and 15th on the grid for us then.
Oh shit, I wasn't paying attention. I sort of leaned forward in my chair and my finger slipped off the steering stick.
Oh no.
Oh god damn. Never mind, we both binned it. It's okay.
Never mind. Was it bad dress
We can have a
rehearsal,
burn
good
from the
performance?
I had it on pole as well temporarily.
Dang it. Yeah, it got nice and dry.
God damn. What a fool. What a fool. Oh well, it'll be a slightly shorter episode today.
Indeed. On to race.
On to race, cock.
Yes, that's a shame. Have we changed any of our opinions on the Sauber drivers, since they're the other two that we haven't got on the seat yet? Are we still thinking...
I don't know. I still want them to retain Merrickson.
I do.
I'm pretty sure Wehrlein is out there.
Yeah,
I've got a feeling that we'll see Giovinazzi in somewhere hanging around there, whether he gets a test drive.
Yeah.
But we know it's basically Charles Leclerc that's getting the race seat.
Yeah.
I don't think that's really up for debate at this point.
Yeah.
I'm going ultra soft, super soft, apparently.
Yeah, I was just looking at that, thinking, do I want to do that as well?
Well, actually, I'd prefer to take super softs in the middle stint. So I think I will.
Okay. You devil. You devil.
Oh no, remove stint. Yeah, I like that. It normally goes very badly when I make my own strategies, but I've got a feeling this time it will pay off.
This time, Gadget.
Right. Anyway, I'm going to get back to my train of thought now because I've just been all over the place since I had my accident. I've not been the same since the accident.
Oh, how very Felipe of you.
Yeah. Speaking of which, obviously he has retired for the second time.
Yes.
Maybe he'll be back next year. Who even knows? I just don't believe him anymore. But I thought he had a pretty good Brazilian Grand Prix, actually.
I thought he had a great
what did you
Brazilian Grand
think?
Prix. That car he was punching well above his weight on that car. I hadn't realised that he'd not actually had a top 5 all year, because I thought he might have got one right at the beginning of the season when the Williams car was actually capable of performing stuff like that. But yeah, I thought he had a really good race. I thought it was really nice afterwards that Felipe Junior, Mr. Massa Junior, not only done the radio but also got on the podium, which then prompted the excellent meme of Felipe Massa's son has been on the podium more times than Nico Hulkenberg.
That is sad but true.
It is. Yeah, I thought it was all very lovely. Lots of crying. Everyone doing that kind of stuff, which is grand. And Alonso at the end actually giving him a wave and a thumbs up and like a great race after all of that. So that was a nice little rivalry. Felipe was faster this time. Yeah, thumbs up.
Yeah, I thought it was a good way to go out. I did hear some commentators saying that this is on another podcast, a rival podcast.
Boo.
That they sort of felt it was good and everything, but why didn't people like Webber and Button get such a great send off?
I think it's because Liberty Media are now milking it as a big thing. I also think that Webber is it's situational. So the Brazilian Grand Prix is at the end of the year. The Australian Grand Prix is at the start of it. Webber hadn't announced his retirement. If it was back into the 90s when Adelaide was the final Grand Prix of the year still, Webber would have had a great send off. Button had spent the last year saying how much he disliked the sport and was had enough. And I think where he was kind of like, yeah, I'll be back in 2018 maybe. You don't know. You don't want to do a false massa.
No, you don't want to do a false massa. That is true. It's going to be brown trousers time into turn 1.
Oh, it is because we've got Palmer with us as well. Oh.
I crept through that corner and I still managed to get hit. Oh god, we're next to each other.
I get so scared when I'm racing around you.
Yeah, same. I don't know why. It's almost like I don't trust you, Si.
I don't trust Jolien. Which I thought was a made-up name, and then I found someone on a dating website also called Jolien, and I was like,
Isn't it French?
Oh, it feels like it should be. I know what you mean.
Yeah, Jolien. Yeah, I think it's French.
Jolie.
Ooh.
It's Vettel doing.
Oh,
I see yellow flags. Was that you?
Yeah.
Oh no.
I couldn't get full lock on my steering for some reason, and it wouldn't take the corner. It's all going wrong for me, Si.
No. It's because we'd cursed this by saying we might actually be vaguely all right round this circuit.
It's all right. I'm already back on the tail of the Saubers. I think I can get things back on track. It's the same problem I had in Monaco, actually, that sometimes the steering just doesn't lock.
I know what you mean. I've had this before.
And you've got to sort of turn fully to the side and down slightly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always work. Right, out of my way now, Saubers. Peasants. Right, let's try and get this podcast back in order.
Yeah, so I know we talked about this very briefly off air beforehand. Oh, caveats. That's not what we were talking about beforehand, but that was a very good move by me, if I do say so myself. We were saying beforehand. Oh dear. Around the joys of Lewis Hamilton and whether or not he's been the best, and you were saying that he was making some really disparaging comments about just being disrespectful, and I'd like to know more about that, please, because I've missed this.
Well, actually, it was kind of an irony, right? Because if you recall, after he was awarded his championship, he could have done the magnanimous champion thing, but what he did was immediately launch into an attack on Nico Rosberg, a guy who, aside from being retired, also was at that very moment congratulating him on the internet. And I don't know, it struck me, it's like Lewis has become sort of a Donald Trump-like figure, where, you know, the election is over, but he's still talking about Hillary all the time.
Excellent.
But then, just today, a story came out in Autosport where he was talking about, well, I had to have words with Vettel about being disrespectful. I think respect is really important. And it's like, well, where was your respect for Nico? I just thought it was very very unsporting, and completely unnecessary. You know, why would you bring Rosberg into it? What's Rosberg done? He's at home eating Pringles.
Yeah, he's got nothing to do with this championship.
But did you hear what he actually said?
No, what did
he said? He said, well, they said it must feel good to be a full-time champion. He said, yeah, well, you know, I could have done what Nico did and just what was it? Did he say it was a kind of coward's way out or something, or could have just retired? I could have just walked away with the trophy and retired. And he was implying that like Rosberg couldn't repeat the feat, which you know may very well be true, but we will never know. Oh fucking hell!
Like, that's not the time or place to be sitting there trying to rip someone else down. You should be saying about how great you are, not how crap someone else is.
My race is over.
Oh no, what's happened?
My wing is completely knackered because the AI will not allow you to overtake.
I've noticed
they just won't.
being very wide at the moment. Fucking take that. Thank you. Right, onward.
Gap to car in front is 2.
What position are you, Ombre?
7.
God damn, I should be up there.
And there's an absolute smasher going on right up ahead as well. Because, like, the grid's not quite normal. So the Force Indias are busy battling with the Red Bulls, and there's the Ferraris that both had terrible starts and are in the middle of it. So everyone's just smacking into each other.
I saw Vettel started ahead of me.
Wow.
And I've just lost 22, 23 seconds in the pits, 25. 29-second pit stop.
Oh my god.
It's because I went to overtake Van Dorn and he just took the corner as normal, as if I wasn't there, and spun me round, and I lost my nose in the barrier.
So, because Hamilton, who's busy talking about how grand he is, and we kind of have had this discussion slightly before, but in the Brazilian Grand Prix, he started from the pit lane, came through to finish 4th, in what was a very good drive. Sky F1, which is where I was slightly illegally watching the race from, starts going on about how that was one of the all-time great drives of Formula One and this, that and the other, as they like to do, because they've got about an hour pre and post race to kill, so they keep on asking things like, so just how good is Ocon? Every race. And then they're like, yeah, well, Sergio needs to step up his game a little bit. Beforehand, it was, when will Jolyon get a break? And now that he's broke, now it's just back.
He's properly broke.
No, it's properly broke. Now it's just back to how great is Lewis Hamilton again. At least they had some variety with the British drivers. Stupid car. With the advent of everyone saying about how great that drive is, I wanted to ask you, not just in that drive, but just in general, in an era where people are busy looking after their own race because of their tyres and their strategies and their fuel loads and so on, is a burn from the back today worth just as much as a burn from the back, say, 20 years ago?
That is a fantastic question. In a sense, I would say yes, because the burn from the back I most remember are stuff like Schumacher doing it. And it was under the same circumstances again, where his car was just vastly superior to everything around it. I also want to point out that a lot of people shone a lot of sunlight up Lewis's backside for that drive, but he had a completely rebuilt car.
With an engine
like everything was new, so he wasn't running an engine that had 2 or 3 races on it, fresh gearbox, some updated components. It was a superior car even to what Bottas was able to drive. So I don't really want to put too much too much icing and sprinkles on that drive, for the simple fact that he was running in a totally different formula to everybody else. I think it makes Ricciardo's drive all the more impressive that he wasn't running with the same, let's call it, creative freedom as Lewis and his engineers were. That said, I don't want to diminish it too much because it was still a good drive, and it shows that. I mean, he's been someone that I've always criticised in a way, because whenever he's not at the front but has a car that's capable of it, his driving tends to become very scrappy.
Yeah.
So if he has a bad start and drops down to fourth or whatever, it's a coin toss as to whether he gets it back up there. And he tends to make some rather unconventional moves. He gets a little bit out of shape in the corners. This time I didn't see any of that, and I don't know if it's just that he's matured, if it's because the championship was already in the bag, or if it's because the car was just a masterpiece. It's very hard to say. But I'd still put a burn from the back today in roughly the same ballpark as a burn from the back in the 90s. I don't know what you think about that.
I actually agree, because of field spread, as you were saying beforehand. So when you had like Schumacher 16th from the grid in Spa in 95, coming through to win that, the difference between first and 16th was probably about 4 seconds, if not a bit more at that time, when you're looking at where the Minardi's, Arrows's, Tyrrell's were. And so actually the overlap was way bigger, so you was able to put on the overtake without needing gubbins like DRS, DRS and so on. So I think it's horses for courses.
Indeed. Has anyone pitted yet?
No. I was asked if I wanted to pit, but no, next lap onwards I think you'll start to see people.
I pitted crazy early, but it's good because I've pretty much made up the pit stop now. I'm not a million miles behind the Saubers. I'm hoping I can still.
Horrific, so you should be
I'm hoping I can still claw some points out of this race.
Excellent. Is that a burn from the back by any chance?
It could be, and to answer your question, yes, it is impressive when I do it. Not when Lewis does it, but when I do it. Masterpiece.
If anyone's joining us, we're not talking about how we survive a curry house. This is going to be messy, isn't it?
Switching on from that a little bit, we got some questions.
Yeah.
And I forwarded them over to you, and one of them, I believe this was from Lee. I'm sorry if I'm mixing up names and questions because I'm not looking at my phone right now. Who said, well, if you guys have put Lewis as arguably the best British driver of all time, and Jenson Button beat him for all the years they were teammates, then surely shouldn't Jenson qualify above? And the only reason he's not there is because he didn't have the right car under him more often. What do you reckon to that?
I think it should be known on this Failcast podcast that we are Button fans, aren't we? To some
Indeed.
degree. I think he is an unsung gentleman to a degree. I also think that during Hamilton's quote-unquote darker years, aka when he was Felipe Magnet, that was the time when he was with Jenson, and Jenson actually put some rings on him. And I've ordered it for myself, the Jenson Button autobiography that he's just put out. And apparently, there's quite a lot of revealing of how weird. Oh, people pitting now about how weird he is. But
Yeah, I saw that he described him as weird,
yes,
which is an interesting choice of words.
loving that. It's. I think they both have different strengths and weaknesses in periods of their time where one was better than the other, maybe. But I do think Button gets an awful lot of stick for basically winning the championship in the best car and then not being able to win the championship in not the best car, which is essentially what most people have done in their career. I don't know which one I'd rank above the other, though.
It is hard, isn't it? And you shouldn't be able to say that, really, when they were both driving identical cars.
No. I'd say Hamilton's probably got slightly more in raw speed. I'd say as a rounded package and as a driver that I'd actually want to have in my team and win and score results, I'd rather have Button.
I think it's very similar, actually, to the sort of comparisons you could make with Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen.
Yes.
In that, Verstappen is probably the one with the greater sort of blistering speed, and he's the more entertaining driver. But as the guy who brings it home in all conditions in the points, Ricciardo's probably the driver that you want, because he's not going to go for the glory run, he's just going to get the job done. And you're sort of seeing that now, actually. Like in Brazil, where Verstappen was complaining about his tyres, and the team were like, there's no need for you to come in for tyres. And he realised he had a pit stop in hand to Ricciardo, and all he wanted was the lap record.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's an Alonso Massa battle I'm about to get caught up in, and the AI are driving super erratically, like they're weaving left and right in the braking zone.
Yes, I've noticed this around this track. Only on this
this
day,
is why
in single player, I was all right. I'm pitting this lap.
This is why I was in the barrier trying to overtake a McLaren before, because he was weaving in the braking zone. He's just hit me again. He's just hit me again. Stop it.
No, that comparison to Ricciardo and Verstappen actually really, really interesting, because I wouldn't have thought of it like that, but actually, like comparing the two, but it's exactly how I think of those two as drivers as well.
I'm beginning though to see Ricciardo's chances of a world championship just ride off into the distance.
Yeah.
Where once I thought it was only a matter of time, I think now it might never happen.
Okay, you only have to stop once now. One stop left.
Which is an absolute tragedy. But I honestly think that could be what happens.
Yes, thank you, Joey and Palmer.
Said nobody ever.
Ah, you twit, Simon. Straight into the barriers. We're okay then.
I've just spun again.
I wonder if this game simulates the fact that it rained in qualifying, so this track is now extra greasy or something.
I don't know, but I never normally spin like this. And I'm now 4 seconds down on Stroll because of that spin.
Oh dear.
It's really frustrating because I've been putting in some fastest laps. I don't know if you've been getting the...
Yeah.
And I can see you. You are on my screen. But I just can't get to you.
Sounds like me trying to lose some weight. I can see it, but it'll never happen.
It'll never happen. So, what else did we get in the questions? Oh, that was it. So we spent a lot of time talking about where drivers are going to end up next year.
Mm-hmm.
And we were asked where we would put each other. And I actually thought that was a really interesting question, because I realised
in the game or in real life, I wonder.
I presume both, but whichever. Because I realised that I've always thought of you as a Renault driver, and I don't know why that is, unless it's just that it just so happens this season and last season that's who you played in your career mode.
Yeah.
But I mean, historically, I think you're a Minardi man myself.
Yes. I would be a Minardi man. That's exactly where I'd put myself, and I would put you at if arrows aren't in the game, obviously. Alongside Pedro Diniz, then I would
Dream Team.
Yes. then I would put you in a Jordan or Force India.
That is a very interesting choice, actually. A large part of me was expecting to hear you say Sauber, but now you've said Jordan, that has dinged my bell. I am on board with that. I like that. I feel very flattered.
Plus, you in pink looks superb.
I would. It's the Mexican connection as well.
Yeah.
If we were talking about the grid as it is at the moment, I still think you're a Renault man. I think it's just because it's quite a. I don't know. It's a team that seems happy. Does that make some sense?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Especially now they've got rid of Mr. Cloudy Face. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's sort of like there's an optimism there right now. That I don't know. Maybe I make a character association there, but yeah, I thought it was quite a good question.
Yeah.
The other thing we were asked was about McLaren producing their own engine, and do we think it will be any good? And I really did give this some thought, actually, and I feel inclined to say it wouldn't be good. And I think it's just because they don't they've always put other people's engines in their cars, whether it's Formula One or their supercars.
Oh, okay.
And so it strikes me as a not Van Dorn again. Stop weaving under braking. It really upsets me. It unsettles me. I don't know what to do.
Get the pills! Get the pills!
Now I can understand why it's attractive for them to do it, because I mean, even when they were a World Championship winning outfit, they were always at the mercy of an engine supplier.
Yeah.
Whereas, Ferrari, even though they haven't been winning, do reap the benefits of doing everything in-house, right? You know how the engine will work with the chassis because you've already designed the engine, which is something that teams always struggle with, right? How to get the package correct when you don't know the specification size of the engine until the very last minute, really.
Yeah.
Would you concur with that viewpoint? That it's a nice idea, but they couldn't pull it off.
Yeah, I could see an in partnership with McLaren working, if that makes sense. So say I'm going to proper go back on like remember when Brian Hart, this will separate older people out, used to do the engines for Arrows. And then he just kind of got sucked into what they were doing with the Arrows project to make their own engine in '98, which all kind of went a bit wrong. But I could see McLaren kind of doing that and taking in a team or a company into their own, like a Slimer, and trying to get them into their culture. And maybe it would work that way. I also think, though, that McLaren as a team at the moment are a bit. They need to get their house in order, and I wonder if they would now actually know, having suffered years of a bad engine, what a good engine would look like.
I do have to say, though, I think the MCL 32 has turned into a fantastic little car.
Oh yeah, you can really. I mean, like Brazil round. Was it in Q1 or Q2? Alonso was like the fastest car in Sector 2, which is all corners. And you just think, right, yeah, that car is really, really on the nose.
I mean, I know he's super happy with the chassis, actually, and they say they think they're on par with Red Bull in terms of...
I believe him.
Chassis performance.
Now I do, anyway.
Which I could believe. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard. I mean, maybe if they bought someone like Ilmore.
Yeah.
Or Brown, Neil Brown Engineering. They make engines for the junior formulae.
That'd be interesting.
As an independent. I always think it's a shame that Craig Pollock's Pure didn't get off the ground. Just because I think F1 benefits from the controversy that follows Craig Pollock everywhere he goes. suddenly Jacques Villeneuve is in the lead driver's slot at McLaren.
That would make me gigs.
Which is a nice segue, because I want to talk about Jacques, because he just doesn't go away, does he?
He's the gift that keeps giving.
Yeah, his new target has been Valtteri Bottas.
Oh, right.
He had a real pop at Bottas after the Brazilian Grand Prix and described him as embarrassing.
Oh.
And I thought to myself, that's pretty big talk for a guy who moved to BAR and then drifted into obscurity and managed to get fired from Sauber. You know, then yeah, he won a world championship, but in a car the likes of which we haven't seen since. I mean, that machine was a masterpiece.
What an odd thing to say, especially if you don't understand like the logistics and the. I suppose if you looked at something and you understood none of the technical goings on that's going on at all, it would look bad that your teammate has come from the pit lane to finish just a couple of seconds behind you. But when you put it in the context of everything else, then it's more understandable.
And the fact that it was a brand new car.
We're approaching the pit window. You'll be on the super
I mean, but I did still like want to use that as a springboard to talk about Bottas, because obviously he was signed for next year, and I've sort of, I mean, I don't want to agree with everyone's favourite French Canadian rock star, but it does seem to me that since he was renewed at Mercedes, he sort of dropped back quite significantly.
2 seconds.
He's become kind of a Kimi Raikkonen figure for me.
There is a problem with Finnish drivers in F1 at the moment. Both of them should not really be where they are, in my opinion.
And I think it's a shame he couldn't go back to Williams. I think Williams is his home. It's the right team for him.
Bottas needs to be a team equal or team leader. He's. I think what it's shown for me this year is that he's mentally not cut out to be beaten.
No.
Because as soon as he gets beaten by Hamilton, head down, I don't know what I'm doing, it's all so terrible, oh, I will be better next time, yeah.
I think unless things turn around fairly drastically, next year should be his last year at Mercedes.
Yeah, reminds me of
hopefully. Yeah, and it's such a shame because I really rated Bottas and I thought he was ready to take the step up to Mercedes. Yeah. To be honest, I had faith in him to deliver.
Isn't it interesting though that then for me this season has shed a light as to why Ferrari didn't take Bottas?
Yes. I think also it's showing how good Nico Rosberg was.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, I mean, even today I still see a lot of Nico Rosberg hate around, and not just from Lewis Hamilton, but mainly from his fans, actually.
Yeah.
Actually, I got into a beef on Twitter with a guy the other day. I don't know if you saw that.
No.
I tried to stay out of Twitter drama, but, like, there've been... I think it was actually Nico congratulating Lewis, and him or someone around him had made a comment about Nico being crap or whatever, and then there was some young girl who seemed to be a Rosberg fan, and she said, well, you know, he's a driver who beat Lewis to a championship, and the guy was like, yeah, whatever, and I was like, well, hate to be pedantic, mate, but technically he did win the championship.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy goes, I can't remember exactly what he said actually, but basically he was implying that, you know, Nico was just a nobody. And I said, well, when you consider that it takes much greater level of consistency to win a championship these days than it used to. I mean, last season at that point was the longest season in F1 history.
Mm.
And reliability has always and will forever remain part of the sport. You can't take... You genuinely can't take Rosberg's championship away from him. It was deserved. There's no such thing as an undeserved title. And the guy actually wrote back, yeah, but who's the champ now? And I was like, yeah, but by that logic, Ayrton Senna was just a hack, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Oh dear. Sometimes there's just no beating people with logic like that.
Yeah, I mean, and he was like, "Are you seriously comparing Senna and Rosberg?" And I was like, "Well, no, you are, because what you're saying is, well, you know, oh, Fangio, yeah, great driver, but what's he done lately?" You know?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's like you can't. Yeah, I don't know, man. I feel that we're starting to see a very reactionary breed of F1 fan that I don't recall being there before,
I think that's
coming out of
down
the woodwork.
I think that's down to social media and the way how people are now conditioned by advertising and media in general to be like, so what do you think on that? Oh, you can't sit on the fence, you flower, you pansy, whatever, blah blah blah. Have an opinion, yeah. Now I'm going to get into a Twitter rant with you, blah 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 blah. Like
Yeah,
my
it's
Instagram
become.
post.
I think everything's become so polarized that it's spread to everything.
Yeah.
Palmer, look. I feel bad for you. I know you got fired. I know you have a stupid French name, but you can't just get in my way like that. It's not okay. I can't believe how slow he is, and he's still 10th. It's mental. Right, I have now recovered to 9th position.
Excellent. Oh, I see. There's a massive train.
And I want to now. I think I've got enough laps just to catch up somewhat. Where are you?
I am currently 6th. I believe the two Force Indias in front of me need to pit though because they're doing super soft as their Middleton.
Aha! Opportunity knocks.
Indeed,
So, sorry, go on.
no, I was going to say super interesting on all of that. I think there was a fourth question as well about Pirelli.
Oh yeah. Are we happy with Pirelli as not only as a tyre supplier but as the sole supplier? And I actually gave quite a lot of thought to this because, I mean, I've always been a strong defender of Pirelli, even when their tyres were falling to pieces, because they did what they were asked. They were told, come in and make a tyre that falls apart like the doors on a clown car, and that's what they did.
Yep.
They got a lot of abuse for it that I don't feel they deserved.
Agreed.
And there were delaminations and things, but the teams were running the tyres in a way that Pirelli had told them not to, explicitly. The right front tyre has to go on the right hand side. That it's a very reasonable request to make. But I've been quite uncertain, to be honest, about the idea of a control tyre, and I think it's because I grew up late 80s through 90s with the tyre wars and how fun the tyre wars were. I mean, of course, people tend to immediately default to the Schumacher years and think, well, it was super boring. But if you remember when Bridgestone entered the sport, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, Prost were seriously competitive in a way that they hadn't been for a very long time. When as Ligier. I think there's something to be said for the tyre wars. Problem is, it's just not compatible with modern F1 and the need to cut costs because tyre wars were incredibly expensive.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
But what do you think? I mean, do you like the idea of the control tyre?
I don't. I think. So I'm very happy with what Pirelli have done because they've done what they can within the rules that they're given, and I think it's a thankless task when you are the sole tyre supplier. And actually, when you look at what's gone on with their tyres, when you look at, say, NASCAR, where there's like delaminations every race for several drivers, when you look at like the context of performance and reliability ratio, I think they've been all right, to be fair. On the control tyre, oh god, what?
What?
I don't even know how that's happened.
That should not be possible.
No.
Nice job, Cody's.
Well done. There's nothing they can do anyway, they can only watch. What was I going to say? Yeah, so the issue that we've got is I don't mind there being a control tyre so long as the rules for tyres stay simple and normal and not terrible, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
when we go in looking at next year where there's like super ultra hyper sensitive soft going on, you kind of think, well, what's going on there? So it kind of makes me a bit confused. I think the tyre regulations just need to be simple and understandable, because it reminds me like this A, B, C, D, E, F, G compounds. Do you remember back in the early 90s when you had A, B, C and D tyres?
Yeah, I remember. It was Murray's favourite thing to talk about.
So it reminds me
running the D compound.
Ooh.
I always thought that was a bad name because it didn't really convey much about the tyre. At least Pirelli's tyres are named
Yeah.
logically until now, because now they're talking about they're coming up with a new wet weather tyre. So I don't know if that means we're going to have two kinds of full wet or if this is a replacement.
Okay. Soft wet, hard wet.
And, yeah, and then you've got the
Most females.
Hypoallergenic super soft feelings tyre that they're talking about. But I actually, again, another good segue, because I wanted to ask you specifically about that tyre. Do you think it's necessary given how the ultra softs are?
No, I don't. I think, see, that's spending money in the wrong place. I think open up if they're going to do tyre compounds like that, then and they're so obsessed with we don't want one-stop strategies, bring free tyre compounds. You must use all three during the race, job done. And then you don't have to waste tyre performance or tyre compounds and money spending on yet more different things for different tracks. Yes, there'll be some tracks where things do work and don't work very well, but that's part of the makeup of a season. It's like saying, oh well, we're going to put I don't know, you can't, mind you now, I've already defeated my own point because gears are already ratioed into the same manner, aren't they? Yeah, shut up, Simon.
But I mean, it makes me wonder, well, why the hell do we still have a hard compound? No one uses the hard compound, no one likes the hard compound.
Yeah,
even in the world of
to
video
Spain,
games, you and I hate the hard compound.
Yeah, I mean, it comes out at like Spain, and that's about it, and maybe one or two other tracks. But even then, we go out of our way to avoid it.
So why not? Why not get rid of the hard and call this new tyre the ultra soft, and move everything down one?
Yeah,
the medium becomes hard. I don't know why we keep having to have this gradation of soft. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, surely now soft is medium.
Yeah, medium is hard,
already,
and hard is very hard if you're going to keep it.
Yeah,
also, I really don't want to have A, B, C, D, E, F, G compounds because you know how quickly it's going to get boring that we're going to have to say things like Hamilton's got the D.
Yeah, I mean, I do like that they have a sort of a rainbow of tyres and they take a selection of compounds rather than making all compounds available at every Grand Prix. I think that's good because I think having the selection of three tyres at least keeps things fairly easy to keep track of.
Yes.
But I don't know. I don't think it's necessary to have the new feelings tyre.
I feel like it's reactionary to the fact that Pirelli on purpose were conservative this year because of the amount of shit that they got in 2012, 2013 with delaminations when they were told not to go conservative. So it's a product of its own issue.
What it makes me think, though, and one of them was theory past you, is the only reason that you would have a tyre softer than ultra soft, and given that ultra soft's good for like 4 laps, do you think that there's serious consideration, which has been talked about before, to offering points for the fastest lap of the race?
It wouldn't surprise me because there's so much.
Because sorry to cut you off, but I see this as a tyre that a Sauber can slam on end of the race to get some points that they can't win during the race. Because the cars out front aren't going to stop and jeopardise the race win, but Sauber could do with 1 or 2 points to get in the fastest lap.
I think that's an interesting point. I think they'd also need to look at what they do with Grand Prix 2, GP2, and GP3 or Formula 2, sorry, and GP3, where because they award points for fastest laps, but you need to have been in the top 10 to be able to collect that point, otherwise it doesn't count. So it stops people that are like, shit, I'm going to finish 12th, screw it, let's come into the pits and get that fastest lap point.
I mean, I've always hated the idea of a point for fastest lap, but do you know what? Now I've kind of sold myself on it there, because the idea of watching a group of, you know, back of the pack cars and even some midfielders that are maybe out of position suddenly all pit at the last minute and do like a last minute sprint. That, I mean, there is sort of an appeal to that, as long as it doesn't. It shouldn't be incentivized at the expense of the sort of marathon, not a sprint aspect of a Formula One Grand Prix.
So how would you?
If that makes sense.
It does make sense. How would you feel if? Hi Paddy. Faster wearing tyres is what Paddy was saying. I think it was Paddy that was trying to join us there to watch the race. I don't think he realised that we were broadcasting. Yeah, no, that's an interesting point, I guess. So let me put a situation to you, and it could be as cringeworthy as the double point saga for the final race of the year. We get to the final race of the year at Abu Dhabi. Yeah, no one mentioned the double points. We get to the final race in Abu Dhabi. McLaren and Sauber haven't scored. McLaren come into the pits, put on those tyres when they were running, say, or Sauber do, or whoever it is, and they get a singular point for fastest lap of the race, even though that means that actually they've never ever beaten McLaren on track during the course of a season. Does that then mean that they are entitled to have that 9th place, and would you feel sour on that?
It's an excellent question. Yeah, that does undermine it a little bit. It's that balance, isn't it, between like the purity of competition of Formula One and the entertainment value. Because what I was thinking was, if you've got, you know, the car's down to 12, they're not going to pit for that hypoallergenic cuddle tyre because they're fighting for the actual points that matter, right?
Yeah.
But if you're sort of out of reach of fighting for the points, then you're all going to have that temptation to pit, and all these cars are going to be racing each other because you can't set the fastest lap if you're not in clean air. So there is still a competitive element to it. But I agree that it does have the possibility to mess with the constructors in a way that isn't totally legit. Somehow.
I think for me, I've got nothing against points for fastest laps, but there needs to be maybe a point redistribution, maybe, to make sure that people, if you're incentivized to go for that point because it's all that you can go for, don't then outscore the people who are legitimately racing for realsies, if that makes sense.
Or you make it a half point for fastest lap.
Yeah, something like that.
And that way you can't be in a situation where both Sauber and McLaren are on 0 points going into the last Grand Prix, and prize money is won on the back of a single fastest lap at a single event.
Yeah, because I guess as well, it's also about making sure that, say like where we had in Brazil, Verstappen could come in and he had a pit stop advantage over the people behind, especially when you look at how the grid is at the moment. The top 6, if you're in 6th position, you might as well go, oh, fuck it, let's come in for a pit stop, because the Force Indias are 35 seconds behind, and I'll collect that point for fastest lap.
Exactly. If you look at like the Renault Toro Rosso Haas squeeze right now in the championship,
yes,
those are cars that, on occasion, not always, but on occasion, would have had the incentive to claim that point for fastest lap and still finishing the points.
Yes. Yeah. So it's an interesting thing. I'll have to ponder on that. And I guess actually, because we're coming to the end of this, we've not touched on it. Handbags at dawn for the Renault and Toro Rosso saga.
Yeah, we haven't touched half of the big news things because we lost 2 segments of qualifying.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to talk about the announcement of Toro Rosso confirming their drivers as if they had a choice.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about that, and we might have to just run over the end of the race a little bit. So obviously in Brazil we saw big fireworks going on between particularly Toro Rosso and Red Bull, but then Toro Rosso and Renault, sorry. But then Red Bull got pulled into the fight. This is so frustrating. I'm going to catch the cars in front on the last lap, and I'm just going to finish with 1 point. That sucks. I really could have been up there with you this Grand Prix. Okay. Anywho, now there was that famous footage, now famous footage of Helmut Marko, getting a severe bollocking from Cyril in the paddock. And when I first saw the picture of it, I saw a photograph of that exchange, and I thought, well, it's easy to take 10 pictures of a conversation and find the one where they both look angry.
Yeah.
But then I saw that Sky had actually caught it on camera and broadcast it, and yeah, he was furious, absolutely furious. And of course, in essence, there was questions around the reliability of the Renault power unit. Renault would blame Toro Rosso, saying there is something about the STR12 that is causing the engine to fail. Toro Rosso then hit back and said there's nothing wrong with the car. And actually we think that Renault are, because they're in competition with us, they're sabotaging us. Which is a pretty hefty accusation to throw around.
Yeah.
Then obviously Renault announced pretty publicly, actually, they're looking at the contract, and they were planning to, if possible, withhold engines from Toro Rosso for the rest of the season. That means they wouldn't be able to compete in Brazil or Abu Dhabi. And it was only Red Bull stepping in directly and releasing a public statement saying we believe Renault treat all their customers equally. That smoothed things over. Where this gets really interesting is it makes me believe that I think we could see... Oh, you finished with a podium, you cheeky rascal.
Last corner dive.
Oh, Simon.
Sorry.
The points gap is going to be huge between us now.
It's okay, it's okay.
So, this leads me to think that you could see Red Bull being forced to switch to Honda as soon as next year. And I know that sounds like a pretty extreme thing to say, but I really think Renault have had enough. I really do feel they've had enough. They've got McLaren now. They've got their own team.
Yep.
I don't think they want the hassle from Red Bull. And the relationship has been strained for quite some time.
Yeah.
The fact that they were very genuinely looking at terminating the supply immediately for Toro Rosso, which posed an interesting question to me, because I wonder, actually, do you think Honda have enough power units on the racks to make the switch to Toro Rosso in time for Abu Dhabi? I'd be very interested to see if they could pull that off.
I wouldn't know. I don't even know if the engine would fit in. It would be a logistical nightmare, surely.
It would, but it would have been quite interesting to see it happen.
Yeah.
And the point is, even though Red Bull smoothed the waters over, I don't think a problem like that just goes away after a public statement. I think whatever animosity is there is still very, very hot and very, very real. And I personally, if I was Cyril Abitprabul, I would first of all change my fucking name, but I would have terminated the contract, quite honestly. I would have done it. And I know it's not very sporting.
Renault have an obligation to supply and be forced to finish their deal with Toro Rosso this year.
Well, I mean, that's what they were looking at, right? Do they actually have to? Or is there a clause that allows them to get out? Or can they terminate with compensation, for example?
Because you
I
could be
suspect you're
bringing
right.
someone into disrepute, couldn't you? And maybe there's something written in the contract that says you've brought our company into disrepute. It'd be like if, I don't know, Eric Boulier got suddenly involved in Hollywood Sexgate. It might be that actually they don't want to associate with them because you brought the team into disrepute and therefore the engine manufacturer into disrepute, and then they can break contracts that way legally. So maybe they were trying it from that angle.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it was probably quite messy legally, and probably Renault's lawyers said, for the sake of 2 races, is it really necessary?
Yeah.
But if they were using Renault power next year, I think they probably would have gone through with it. And it does make me think that in the off-season, you might actually see Red Bull touching base with Honda. I wouldn't be surprised.
That's
actually
interesting.
Wouldn't be surprised.
I hadn't crossed my mind, actually, to be fair, but now that you've said it, it is interesting because Renault, they're damned whatever they do, because yes, Red Bull make a better chassis than Renault at the moment, and you can see, but the gap is closing between the two slowly. But Red Bull are like, we would win if it weren't for Renault all the time, forgetting of, I mean, we go over this all the time about how they were a team and they won together and all of this stuff. It's so in the background now that you're kind of like, you do wonder when Renault just go, fuck it then, off you go, because they've already removed the branding of Renault on those cars and it's now a Tag Heuer and all of that kind of stuff.
Exactly. It's not a happy relationship. And the other thing to bear in mind, by the way, is that it seems Renault gave up on this year's car quite early in the season.
Yeah.
After, if you look at like the first third of the season, they were making constant steps forward. To me, it suddenly strikes me that if you consider that McLaren are going to be roughly on par with Red Bull next year, suddenly the Works Renault team is going to be the least competitive Renault-powered team.
Yeah.
Now, let's just assume here that Renault actually pulls something out of the bag, which I think they maybe could. Do they really want to have Red Bull and McLaren in their way?
No, that's true. That's true. And actually, James Allen asked them this in the press conference, I think, at Brazil, if I remember rightly.
Good on you, James.
I do like James Allen. He is sadly missed. I never thought I'd say that when he was actually commentating, but as soon as we went to Jonathan Lethargic, I was like, please, James, all is forgiven. But as a person that speaks on F1, I generally find his opinions really interesting, and he basically said, next year, Renault, you aren't going to be, you potentially are going to be the worst supplied team of Renault engines. Are you prepared for that? And I can't remember who he asked. Must have been Cyril. And they was like, we're aware next year is probably going to be a bit embarrassing for us, but it's all part of our step forward, and we've already accepted that we might actually be the slowest Renault team, but that we won't be that for long. So it's already flagged on their radar that they might be buggered, but it's more of an incentive to go jettison Red Bull out. Wow, you've now got Honda engines. You're now going to be what McLaren are like at the moment if they don't improve.
I mean, if we assume that Red Bull and McLaren are fairly even in terms of chassis, which is what both teams have implied, I think Renault have got all the incentive in the world to make sure a Honda power unit is in the back of that Red Bull.
Yeah.
Because if you think, like, how often did a Honda-powered McLaren get in the way of Renault scoring points? Not very often. Do they really want Red Bull and McLaren to be fighting it out for all the positions between sort of 5th and 9th? That doesn't leave them a lot of points on the table, does it?
No.
And you've got Force India in the mix as well, we can't forget. I mean, I'm starting to see Williams as less of a threat to Renault than perhaps they should be. I think in terms of a pure business decision, I think the time has come to part ways, but whether they'll actually do it or not, I don't know, because I think they are more sensitive than one would think to appearing as good sportsmen. And contributing towards healthy competition.
That's a good point,
very
though.
interesting times.
That is a good point, though, because actually, I wonder how much behind the scenes lobbying there is for the actual sport of. We've tried to help Honda. Honda don't want the help. Yeah. So therefore they're struggling. If Renault then push people into a situation where they're then on top because of that kind of power play shift, do Red Bull then go, right, we've now got a shitty Honda engine that's not shown any improvement. We're now in the middle field. We don't feel that this is happy. If this is not sorted by 2021, we're out. That takes 4 cars off the grid. Renault get the blame. It can be sliced so many different ways, such as the wonderful world of F1 politics.
I would say this is actually one of the most exciting and yet unstable periods in Formula One history for I'd say probably since the early 2000s, when the Concorde Agreement problem arose, and there was nearly a breakaway series.
Yeah, agree.
I would say this is a watershed moment, because the decisions that, and it's not just all in one person's hands. You know, like it used to be Bernie had final say, which incidentally, something else we didn't talk about was Liberty Media revealed that they had to keep on some of Bernie's staff in sort of legal and stuff because he'd laid booby traps for them. Those were the exact words they used. Like he'd left legal booby traps, like clauses in contract drafts and stuff. Like,
for God's sake.
Bernie,
You old dog.
ruffle your hair, you little scamp. But yeah, the decisions that are made now primarily by Liberty Media with Ross Brawn, decisions made by Gene Haas, the board at Porsche, Renault, the board at Cosworth, the board at Aston Martin, and Scuderia Ferrari. Like those are all the key players, and any one decision by the people I've just listed could derail all the decisions of the other group. You know, maybe Ferrari pull out and then their veto to the engine regulations that were supported by more teams, suddenly that veto isn't there anymore, but it's too late. The formula's already set, and maybe teams start pulling out, or engine manufacturers are put off joining the sport because of a team vetoing it that's no longer on the grid. Then you've got, will Red Bull pull out if they're forced to use uncompetitive Honda engines? Will Honda suddenly become competitive? How will the Renault relationship with Red Bull develop? It's all so up in the air. Will Porsche and Cosworth, Aston Martin make it in? And if they do, who's going to get the work steals, and how is that going to shake up the marketplace? It's absolutely fascinating. And then of course, Haas, which if he's a man of his word and says, if we haven't turned it round in 2 years, then I'm off, he might as well be off now. I mean, I don't want to see the grid get any smaller, but if that's his genuine feeling, he should go now, because it's going to save him a lot of money. He's not going to turn it around in 2 years. No one could. It's not possible. So yeah, it's an exciting time. I think we're going to have a lot of good news days between now and the start of next season.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget,
I don't think we're going to struggle in the off season for topics.
No, and just a reminder for everyone, you can keep up with all of that, making sure that you keep up with myself, High Plane Games, Simon, over on YouTube, and
twitch.tv/definitely zero, where nothing happens except this podcast right now. Although I am wrapping out my Grand Prix World playthrough, my Arrows one. Now,
sounding like an interesting season.
yes, we're all in
it is
agreement
definitely. Now, I am coming to the end of my Grand Prix World playthrough with Arrows, my most successful series to date. Some of you may have had problems viewing the part 1 episode of my 2-part finale. It is viewable, but only on desktop devices, and that's because I put a joke in there about Pedro Diniz that required musical accompaniment, and the copyright holders will not let the music be played on a mobile device because of reasons. I'm not removing the joke because it's funny, and that's it. I'm not being bullied. So part 2 will be up this week, and then that will close out that playthrough, which I didn't want to leave unfinished because it was so popular, and I still get lovely emails about it. And then after that, who knows? I really want to pick up my career mode. I'm trying to finish season 1 of my career mode so we can actually get into the meat of the game, and we'll do season 2 all live streamed is my intention. I'm trying to get back online. What's going on for you?
So
what are you doing this week?
This week is actually there's some special stuff going on towards the end of this week, but at the moment it's Motorsport Manager with its latest update with pit crews and endurance stuff. We're doing that on Wednesdays. City Skyline got off to its new thing on Tuesdays, so episode 1 was really well received. I got quite a few messages on that.
Anyway, they took annotations away from us.
I agree with that, Jay. Annotations, I missed those. City Skylines on a Tuesday, where we build Smithington very badly, but we and basically we're going around naming all of the different shops and like power stations and stuff like that. Really bad puns. So I think there's some in there that might make you giggle in the new episode that will come out, because it starts to take on a bit of like an F1 town flavour. So like there will be a restaurant called Dinners in the Oven. So yeah.
Yes, please.
It'll be good. So keep an eye out for that. And then towards the end of the week, there's a lot of new games that come out. I'm sure it's this Saturday where it all happens. Yes, it is. Playlink, which is where you play games on mobile devices with your PS4, has got a raft of games coming out on Friday, I believe. And it's Saturday the 25th or Sunday the 25th of November. I've booked out that evening for a big, huge live stream. So some of the games are playable even if you aren't in the room with me, and you can go onto line and just have the device and play along with. So there'll be Jackbox, there'll be like really little F1 quizzes and stuff like that. I'll be getting pissed as a fart. We'll get takeaway bingo in as well. It'll be good laugh.
I am up for that. That I'm going to be there. Okay. I'm going to be there. That sounds like fun. I'm going to be there.
Cool. That's about it, I think, for this episode. So yeah, as always, an absolute pleasure. And you guys will take care. And thank you very much for people popping in. I know some people, actually, very quick randomness. Some people have been asking, there's about 4 or 5 people now who have PS4s and would like to come in for a celebratory race. So we might look at trying to do something around that, around the Christmas period, and have like viewers come and race us.
I was going to say we should do a Christmas. I wanted to talk to you about a Christmas special. We need to get some, we'll have some F1 bullshit bingo and all kinds of things.
Yes.
We'll figure some stuff out.
We'll sort it out, peeps. Don't worry, we're working on it. But thanks for the messages. We are definitely going to do something with you all. So yeah, you guys will take care. Thank you very much, Mr. Taco.
Yeah, thank you. Love you. Bye.
Bye.